Looks like it might be a stalemate on the left. That's just one of the surprises basically coming out of tonight at the Iowa caucus. Welcome back to the Hardline, everybody. I'm Ed Berliner. Let's go ahead and look at the numbers first that we now have coming in so we can bring you up to speed. Then we'll get right down to some analysis. First of all, in the all-important GOP, Ted Cruz, 28%, Donald Trump, 24%. Maybe it's not the 4%, but maybe it's just the fact that he won right from the outset of the evening. Ted Cruz was basically never behind all night, and Marco Rubio, who many believe has won the night, even though he finishes third, only 1% behind Donald Trump. Ben Carson, 9%. Everybody else from there. There is also late word that Mike Huckabee has now suspended his presidential campaign. He did not say dropping out officially. He said suspended. Let's look at the left right now, because Hillary Clinton is basically in a standoff with Bernie Sanders. 50 to 49%. Many are already calling this a win for Bernie Sanders. Martin O'Malley finished up with 1%. Martin O'Malley has said that he is now dropping out of the race for president. All right. Let's talk about it now. Joined by the senior political contributor at Forbes.com, co-host of Steele and Ungar on Sirius XM POTUS 124, Rick Ungar, and also joining us once again from Washington, D.C., Peter Morici. All right, Rick, you're new to the party here, so let's go ahead and talk about it from the left, because do you agree that even though it's 1%, basically a dead heat, this comes as a win for Bernie Sanders?
Yes and no. I mean, it is definitely a tie. I think Hillary dodges a pretty big bullet here, and Bernie certainly gets to have some bragging rights. Hillary, look, if she had lost tonight, this was a real problem for her. She's probably going to lose next week in New Hampshire, and nobody in history has ever lost the first two primaries and gone on to get the nomination. So she probably dodges the historic bullet here. It's going to be a no harm, no foul, and that takes us to New Hampshire, where I think Hillary's got problems. On the other side of the equation, I've been saying it for a couple of days now, one of those rare times where maybe I was right, that the real surprise of the night would be Marco Rubio. I thought he would finish strong third, maybe even a second, but coming in just a point behind Donald Trump, I don't think anybody saw that coming. This is a big night for him, sets him up like he swallowed a gallon of rocket fuel going into next week's New Hampshire primary.
Well, I'll tell you what, that guy who swallowed that gallon of rocket fuel is now speaking live in Iowa. Let's go live where Marco Rubio is addressing the folks right now who put him in third in the Iowa caucus.
Very clear message. After 7 years of Barack Obama, we are not waiting any longer to take our country back. This is not a time for waiting. For everything that makes this nation great now hangs in the balance. This is a time where we need a president that will truly preserve and protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, not one that undermines, attacks, and ignores the Constitution of the United States. This is the time for a president who will defend our Second Amendment rights, not a president who undermines them. This is a time for a president that will rebuild the U.S. military, because the world is a safer and a better place when the United States has the most powerful military in the world. This is no ordinary election. 2016 is not just a choice between two political parties. 2016 is a referendum. It is a referendum on our identity as a nation and as a people. In America, there are only two ways forward for us now. We can either be greater than we've ever been, or we can be a great nation in decline. If Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton get elected, if they were to win, we will be a great nation in decline. If they win, Obamacare becomes permanent. If they win, these unconstitutional executive orders from this president become permanent. If they win, our military continues to decline. And if they win, the balance of our Supreme Court will be controlled by liberal justices for over a decade or longer. They cannot win. Hillary Clinton is disqualified from being the President of the United States. Because she stored classified and sensitive information on her email server because she thinks she's above the law. And Hillary Clinton can never be commander-in-chief. Because anyone who lies to the families of people who have lost their lives in the service of this country can never be Commander-in-Chief of the United States. And so tonight, I thank you here in Iowa. I thank you because tonight we have taken the first step, but an important step, towards winning this election. If I am our nominee, and I will be our nominee, thanks to what you have done here in this great state, when I am our nominee, we are going to unify this party, and we are going to unify the conservative movement. When I'm our nominee, we are going to grow the conservative movement. We are going to take our message to the people who are struggling paycheck to paycheck, to the students living under the burden of student loans, to the families struggling to raise their children with the right values. We will take our message to them, and we will bring them to our side. When I am a nominee, we will unite our party, we will grow our party, and we will defeat Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or whoever they nominate. I want to thank an all-powerful and mighty God for the chance that He has given us to be a part of this endeavor here in Iowa. It's been a phenomenal experience. I want to thank my wife and my family. I want to congratulate my friend, Senator Ted Cruz. He worked really hard here in Iowa, and he earned his victory tonight. I want to thank another good friend of mine, Governor Mike Huckabee, for his service to our country, to the state of Arkansas. He has announced tonight that he is suspending his campaign. We have tremendous admiration for Governor Huckabee, and we thank him for all he's done. Two centuries ago, an extraordinary generation living in one place at one time here in America, colonists of an English colony, declared their independence from the most powerful empire in the world. They did it with a powerful...
Marco Rubio may have a chance to lead the most powerful free world, if you will, if he does indeed get the GOP nomination and win the general election. He sounds tonight like a man who believes he's already there. At least he's got the momentum. Let's welcome Rick Ungar and Peter Morici back to the show right now as we get ready to close out a little bit on some of the commentary here. Peter, to you. Let's look forward now. Marco Rubio takes 23% of the Iowa caucus balloting. Ted Cruz, 28%. My math is pretty good. That's 51% of the people now who voted in Iowa prefer these two gentlemen over Donald Trump. Does this give both of them great momentum moving forward? And people who said earlier that Trump would have a pretty good time in New Hampshire, are they now the ones guilty of huge overestimation?
Well, I think that they are. A lot will depend on how Trump handles things tomorrow morning. Rubio has handled things very well tonight. He was very gracious. If I were working for him, I would rewrite his speech somewhat. The ordinary American doesn't think about the Constitution. Conservative activists do. Ordinary people think about their personal freedoms and how much they're impaired, for example, by April 15th and keeping track of their entire lives for Barack Obama and having to, report whether they have health insurance and so forth. Life has become a terrible bureaucratic hassle. They are fundamentally less free. I would talk more directly about that because that's what Hillary does, and does it effectively. She talks about people's circumstances. I think he needs to learn to do that. He has to get out of the Senate and get that done. But I think he's really got a shot now. I think he's really the big winner tonight. I know others have said that, so I don't want to dwell on it too long. But a lot of people have won in Iowa and then fizzled out.
All right, let's get to you, Rick, because Hillary Clinton squeaking out what is now a 0.66 of a percentage point, if you go ahead and really get down into the nitty-gritty of the numbers here. Basically, a draw with Bernie Sanders here. Bernie Sanders, everybody says, will have New Hampshire in his back pocket. So that means heading for South Carolina, Hillary Clinton will be in a real battle here, and she really won't have proven anything to that point that she is the clear-cut nominee. Is she in trouble?
No, no, I don't think she is. I think she would have been in trouble if she had lost tonight. But I think pulling out a draw, she's not. Look, it's all going to be about South Carolina for her. If her firewall holds up, as at this point, if she had lost tonight, it might not have. If it holds up in South Carolina, I still think she has the clearest, smoothest sailing, potential indictments aside, of course. I think she's okay. Rubio, though, and one thing I do want to say, though, listening to what Peter was saying, historically, they never care in New Hampshire what happens in Iowa. It has virtually zero impact on them. So we start anew in that sense next week. I think that Marco will gain, so as I said, some rocket fuel coming out of this, but I would be very surprised if it was enough to take Donald Trump's victory away, because he's got a pretty healthy lead up there in New Hampshire.
Gentlemen, few minutes we have left, and it just occurred to me that we have talked about Donald Trump, we have talked about Marco Rubio, we have not talked about Ted Cruz much tonight, because Ted Cruz is still the winner. So, Peter, let me come to you first on this one. Ted Cruz was a decided underdog in almost every single poll that came out. In many cases, some were trumpeting the fact that Donald led by double digits. How did Ted Cruz? It's got to be more than just the ground game, though, Peter, isn't it?
Well, no, I think the ground game had a great deal to do with it. But we aren't talking about Ted Cruz because so many establishment Republicans may feel relieved that Trump has been dispatched. He hasn't, but they may feel relieved. But if he wasn't around, they would look equally suspicious at Ted Cruz. I mean, what's going to happen now is an awful lot of Republicans are going to start rooting for Marco Rubio, and that's why we're talking about him. He really is now the establishment candidate. I think that Jeb Bush does a great disservice to his party and to his country by continuing to campaign, especially if he continues to campaign past New Hampshire. The same thing with Kasich, although I think that Kasich is really running for vice president.
All right, you had something to add in there, Rick?
Let's remember when we're talking about Iowa, Rick Santorum won last time. The time before that, it was Mike Huckabee. It's not like when they pick a Ted Cruz, they go, oh, wait a second, everything's changed. See how Ted Cruz does in New Hampshire. See how he does in South. I mean, the deck is pretty much still stacked against him as he goes into these upcoming states.
Now, Peter, you brought up a very good point when you talked about doing a disservice to the Republican Party. I guarantee that in the morning, people are going to start looking and they're going to say that out of the three gentlemen we mentioned, Cruz, Trump, and Rubio, Dr. Ben Carson finished with about 9%. Everybody else, Paul, Bush, Kasich, Fiorina, Huckabee, Christie, all the way down the line, that's about 15% of the total vote sitting there. Jeb Bush, all right, and there's a few more. Is it time now? Well, let me phrase it a different way, and I'll use your words. Are these candidates doing a disservice, Peter, to the Republicans by staying in the race when it's obvious, at least in Iowa, that we have three, maybe four gentlemen that have the bulk of the votes?
All except perhaps Kasich, all except perhaps Christie. My feeling is that Christie still has some mileage when we get out of Iowa and get into the primary states. He's a different kind of figure. But this does mean something for New Hampshire. It basically establishes Rubio as the alternative. So in that sense, it does mean something in New Hampshire. That's the person the spotlight is going to be on. For the next 5-6 days, he's going to be getting the coverage among the alternatives to Cruz and Trump. So that's very significant. It gives him his window, his opportunity, his stage. Now what he does with it is very, very important. These are perhaps the most crucial 6 days of his life. Because my feeling is if he shows well in New Hampshire, once they get into the South, he starts to become very attractive.
All right, there's something interesting here, Rick.
It's way too early.
Go ahead.
Way too early. It's way too early to call for that. Look, I mean, Iowa has a tendency of standing on its own. Wait till New Hampshire, maybe wait till South Carolina. Yeah. You know, it made sense for a Huckabee to drop out because his only chance was to pull a win in Iowa. But for most of these candidates, it's just too early to ask them to do that.
Well, let's always remember something, too, gentlemen, that I think we have to bring in here. Go ahead, Peter.
It's not just this. It's also where all these candidates stand in the national polls. If you take a poll in New Hampshire, South Carolina, and subsequent states, Jeb Bush just doesn't register. But polls mean something. They mean a great deal.
And by the way,
hold on a second. They mean a great deal in primary states, much more than they do in caucus states.
Great. But the fact is, Jeb Bush is registering in New Hampshire. You ought to give him a week to see what he can do there. If he doesn't do it, I'll probably agree with you. But, you know, it's very easy for us to call on them to drop out. It's not that I support any of those guys. I don't support Republicans. But I'll tell you what, you know, they put in all this money and all this time. They can have more than one primary. They've got another one in a week. Give them that much time.
And I think, gentlemen, the one thing that we have to remember as we close out at least this portion, the discussion portion of the night, that, let's be honest, just because you win Iowa doesn't mean you win the Democratic or the Republican nomination.
Traditionally, it hasn't meant that at all. That's right.
We have seen that far too many times, and I tend to think that by the time we get to South Carolina and some of this momentum starts to turn, we start to see some of these people getting into the feel of things like Marco Rubio. Oh, and by the way, Tim Scott, the South Carolina African-American junior senator, has already said that he's coming out for Marco Rubio. That is going to be big heading towards South Carolina. There you go.
Big.
Rick Ungar, Peter Morici, two of my favorites. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you both soon. When we come back, now that the Iowa caucus is basically done, there is a challenge for specifically Republican voters. You need to listen, and you need to see if you've got the guts to answer, if you will. That's in Telling It Like It Is, next on this special edition of The Hardline.